Hello, I'm doing a book review, and the book I want to review is Dark Knight, a true Batman story. Now, this is a graphic novel written by Paul Dini and illustrated by Eduardo Risso and published by Vertigo, which is an imprint of DC Comics, and this was published in 2016. Now, Paul Dini was one of the main writers of Batman the Animated Series. He also co-created the character of Harley Quinn, who, even though she originated on that series, she has now become a staple in Batman lore. Now, what separates this from other Batman comics is the fact that this is actually based on a true story, which might seem weird given that Batman is a fictional character. When Batman shows up in this, he's not literally showing up, rather he shows up in Paul Dini's head. The comic is about an experience that Paul Dini had back in 1993 where, as he was walking home from a date that had gone south, he was brutally mugged by these two thugs. And the graphic novel is really about Paul Dini trying to overcome the trauma from this mugging, and he uses Batman to help him do so. So Batman, along with other characters from the Batman mythos like Batgirl, Poison Ivy, Two-Face, Scarecrow, and the Joker, show up in this story but as representations of his psyche. But this was a great graphic novel, and it's a really unique mix between sort of an autobiography and kind of a metafiction piece. And this is a really powerful story about overcoming trauma, but it's also a really interesting look at the film and television industry. I also think it's interesting that most of this story is set during the writing of Batman Mask of the Phantasm. And this also really does feel like a love letter to Batman. Like, you see how much Batman means to Paul Dini as a character. But it's also about how Batman means different things to different people, and you see several different incarnations of Batman throughout the comic. And Eduardo Risso's artwork in this is very well done, and it's the right combination between being somewhat realistic but also very cartoonish, which is kind of the point of the story given that Paul Dini is a cartoonist. And it's really interesting to see the real world and the comic book / cartoon world that Paul Dini works in become kind of blurred in this story. Another thing that was really cool, now I'm a big fan of Neil Gaiman's Sandman series, and Morpheus from that series, as well as Morpheus's sister Death, actually show up in this comic. Not literally, rather they show up in sort of a story within the story. Apparently, Paul Dini asked Neil Gaiman for permission to use these characters, and he pitched this idea to Alan Burnett for an episode of Batman the Animated Series, where Batman was actually going to meet Dream of the Endless and Death of the Endless. That would have been freaking amazing, and it's really cool to see Dream and Death show up in this comic, even though I wasn't the biggest fan of how Rizzo drew them. But yeah, I highly recommend Dark Knight, a true Batman story by Paul Dini, and bye.